Reports from Cairo show that Hamas has now allegedly agreed to Palestinian Authority President Abbas's terms for Palestinian reconciliation on the grounds that Abbas completely lift sanctions against Gaza that he had in place to bring Hamas to negotiate. And although Palestinian sources say that reconciliation is now, quote, very close, most still remain cynical, especially as unity talks have failed so many times before. Well, returning now with the most recent analysis is Middle East expert from the Begin Sadat Center at Bar-Ilan University, Dr. Mordechai Kedar. Dr. Kedar, as always, it's a pleasure to have you in.
My honor.
All right, so let's just start. What's your initial kind of reaction to the news coming out of Cairo that, the agreement that Hamas is supposedly?
Look, since Hamas took Gaza over in 2007, more than 11 years ago, I keep saying that this divorce is a permanent divorce. It's clear-cut. Nothing can bring them together to any kind of an agreement because they live in two different times. Hamas has already a state in Gaza, whether we like it or not. They have borders, they have a government, they have ministries, they have army, they have a police, they have military industry, and they know how to produce projectiles and to shoot them. The PA is nothing but an employer of some thousands of Palestinians. That's all. They have absolutely nothing. And there is no way that Hamas will give up on their state only to give it over to somebody who is nothing.
So why these reports? Where are they coming from?
It's all a game in front of the Palestinian people who do want to see some unity, but the leadership cannot even agree on even the date. So to think that after 11 years of negotiations, and you know how many dozens of agreements they signed already, and nothing worked because there are two different mindsets. Look, the PLO is an organization which at some point in the past came to an agreement with Israel and signed with us the Oslo agreements. According to Hamas, this is totally impossible because Israel has no right to exist even with the size of a stamp on Tel Aviv's seashore. There's no way to recognize Israel at all. So definitely when it comes to Israel...
But again, you're talking about this political game. Doesn't it do more harm than good then in the eyes of the people when they see their governments playing this game? Because how obvious is it at this point?
Yes, but don't forget that neither the PA nor Hamas are elected. And they don't have to pay any dues for making mistakes.
So why do they need the game at all?
Because
if they're de facto dictators.
Look, you have to... Look, in the Arab mind, on the Arab culture, there is something which is called aib. Aib means shame. Shame on you. The shame is the last thing which any person would allow to have. So this is why they do anything in order to push the shame to the other side, just like a tennis game, to push the ball to the other side. And we are good. We wanted to come to reconciliation and to come to peace with the other side. Well, they are the bad guys. So this is in order to get rid of this allegation or the suspicion that you are the one who brought the division. They try to blame the other side, and this is why they are motivated to continue the negotiations in order to be able to blame each other.
So based on that, I understand kind of the motivations. If I take that, then I can understand the motivations for the Palestinian Authority. But for Gaza, as you said, Hamas, they already have a state in a sense. So wouldn't it be even less shameful? Wouldn't it be more prideful to just say, you know what, we're done, we're going to have our own little thing and that's it? Or no, because as long as Israel exists, the mission's not over.
They have very clear aspirations to take the West Bank over. Means Judea and Samaria. This is why they want a reconciliation to be allowed to work openly, legally, in the public sphere in Judea and Samaria as well. That's why they need the reconciliation in order to take Judea and Samaria over after they took Gaza 11 years ago.
All right, Dr. Kedar, as always, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
It seems that fires within the government keep popping up faster than they can be put out, as Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit has now made clear that there is no way the courts will approve another extension for voting on the Haredi conscription bill. Speaking to cabinet ministers on Sunday, Mandelblit said that an extension couldn't be requested anyway, as the current December 2nd deadline is itself already an extension. So the problem for Netanyahu here is that he delayed the issue in efforts to avoid angering his religious coalition members, but now that there are no more delays, Netanyahu no longer has the majority necessary to pass reforms anyway. And if a solution isn't passed by Sunday, then the government will be left with two options: to draft ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students by the thousands, or to stand in violation of the law. Perhaps to his benefit, though, at least Netanyahu is acting defense minister as well, following Avigdor Lieberman's resignation, meaning that no one can force Netanyahu to enforce the draft or initiate early elections. But speaking of Lieberman's resignation, that brings us to another one of the coalition's so-called fires. When Lieberman left the coalition, the Security Cabinet was left with too many members in relation to the full cabinet. That means that the Security Cabinet has been operating in violation of Israeli law for the better part of 3 weeks. To solve this crisis, Prime Minister Netanyahu downgraded ministers Yuval Steinitz and Zev Elkin to be alternating Security Cabinet members. That means that they'll trade between voting rights and an observer status in the Security Cabinet month to month. But critics from the opposition have already called this decision a mockery of the Security Cabinet itself. IDF officials have just reported the opening of 2 independent probes into the botched Gaza operation that led to a massive flare-up in violence with Hamas earlier this month. Israeli operatives were discovered in the southern Gaza Strip on November 11th in a mission that ended with the death of an Israeli lieutenant colonel and at least 7 Hamas members. And the subsequent 25 hours were marked with nearly 500 Hamas rockets raining down indiscriminately on southern Israeli civilian targets. Well, now the investigation into just what happened on that fateful night will be conducted by the Military Intelligence Division of the IDF, and it's expected to be submitted within a few weeks' time. The secondary probe is looking more into how raids such as the one in question are conducted in the first place, but meanwhile, Hamas has continued their investigations into the incident as well, having already released images of suspected Israeli operatives. And now, less than a few days after the photos were published, the Hamas military wing spokesman has announced that the effort reportedly paid off, earning Hamas, quote, important information regarding the events of the IDF raid. It's not yet clear what information Hamas is referring to, but we do know that the Gaza terror group has now been operating under the assumption that the unit they're looking for was secretly active in Gaza for a long time, leading up to the November 11th shootout, and right under their noses. Moving on, the White House is reportedly now trying to increase pressure on the International Atomic Energy Agency, following Israeli complaints that the United Nations atomic watchdog wasn't taking its intelligence on Iran seriously. Earlier this year, Netanyahu revealed a massive cache of materials revealed by the Mossad on Iran's nuclear program leading up to the JCPOA nuclear agreement.
Here's what the files included: incriminating documents, incriminating charts, incriminating presentations, incriminating blueprints, incriminating photos, incriminating videos, and more. We've shared this material with the United States, and the United States can vouch for its authenticity. We will also share it with other countries, and we'll share it with the International Atomic Energy Agency.
But according to the Foreign Ministry's political director, Alon Ushpiz, the IAEA was delaying its investigations. And then in a report in Axios earlier this week, it was revealed that a Trump envoy, Brian Hook, allegedly told Israeli officials that the Trump administration would, quote, work aggressively to make sure the IAEA seriously addresses all information provided by Israel, the United States, and other countries regarding the Iranian nuclear program, end quote. The State Department has not yet commented on these reports, however, and at any rate, it's unclear what effect the supposed added pressure will have, as both the EU, Iran, and all the other JCPOA signatories except the United States have pledged again to uphold the nuclear pact. Global anti-Semitism is seemingly on the rise again now, as several recent incidents and poll results shed more light on an ugly truth. This last weekend, a man identified as Mohammed Mohammed was captured on security footage getting into a hit-and-run accident while attempting to run over Orthodox Jews outside of a Los Angeles synagogue. He also shouted anti-Semitic epithets at them. And then just south of LA, the faculty of Pitzer College in Southern California decided to suspend its study abroad program with Haifa University and to condemn university trustees for overturning a divestment motion. This just after similar incidents at the University of Michigan. In response, Haifa University responded simply that while they support the values of freedom of speech and academic freedom, quote, we oppose the BDS movement against Israel as well as boycotts targeting any individual or institution on the basis of nationality, ethnicity, religion, race, gender, or other discriminatory factors, end quote. But as we know, anti-Semitism doesn't stop in the United States either. On Sunday evening, an Israeli journalist was attacked in Berlin trying to film a report. In the video, it can be seen that there are men interrupting her and attacking her and her cameraman with a firecracker. Broadcaster Antonia Yamin claims that the attack occurred because she spoke Hebrew. Then back in April, there was another case in Germany involving a Syrian migrant who whipped his belt at an Arab man wearing a kippah. The man being assaulted filmed the incident on his smartphone as part of a social experiment, which quickly spread on social media and triggered rallies to show solidarity with Jews. Then finally, nearby in Amsterdam, a survey questioning 557 respondents of Dutch Jews showed that half said they were afraid to identify as Jews publicly, which puts into context just how insidious the results of a parallel CNN poll are. CNN found that in 7 different European countries, at least 20% of European respondents think that the Jews have, quote, too much influence worldwide, end quote. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the report saying, "I'm concerned because I think anti-Semitism is an ancient disease that rears its ugly head, and it first attacks the Jews, but it never stops with them. It then sweeps entire societies." Newly elected Representative Alexandria Ocasio Cortez is again drawing ire from the right wing and conservative circles this week after supposedly likening the crisis on the U.S.-Mexico border and incoming migrant caravan to Jewish refugees who were turned away during World War II. The 29-year-old incoming member of the United States House of Representatives tweeted that, quote, "Asking to be considered a refugee and applying for status isn't a crime. It wasn't for Jewish families fleeing Germany. It wasn't for targeted families fleeing Rwanda. It wasn't for communities fleeing war-torn Syria. And it isn't for those fleeing violence in Central America," end quote. But conservatives took hold of this tweet to suggest that Ocasio-Cortez was comparing South and Central American migrants to the 6 million Jews that were brutally and systematically exterminated by the Nazi regime. Perhaps because of previous comments Cortez has made that were seen as insensitive or ignorant with respect to Israel and the Palestinians. But Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, for example, responded by recommending that Cortez, quote, "take a tour of the Holocaust Museum in D.C. as it might help her better understand the differences between the Holocaust and the caravan in Tijuana," end quote. Perhaps not so surprisingly, however, the Holocaust Museum in D.C. actually agrees with Ocasio-Cortez and released a statement suggesting that it is, in fact, not out of place to liken the flight of the Jews from Nazi Europe to the refugee crises today, even if the conditions in the originating country and the nationality of the asylum seekers are different. The statement said, quote, "The museum continues to have grave concern about the global refugee crisis and our response to it, especially as during the 1930s and 1940s, the United States, along with the rest of the world, generally refused to admit Jewish refugees from Nazism due to anti-Semitic and xenophobic attitudes, harsh economic conditions, and national security fears," end quote. Similarly, Melanie Nezer from the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, or HIAS, said Cortez's comment was an entirely appropriate one. In fact, she even explained that, quote, "the laws we have today in this country were based on the UN Convention of 1951, which was based on Jewish refugees being turned away during World War II. Finally, for today, a very rare and tiny biblical stone has just been discovered near the Western Wall by a volunteer at the City of David Sifting Project. The stone has been since identified as a Becca stone weight, and it's one of only a handful of similar stones to have ever been unearthed. The Becca is a First Temple period weight used as a standard for measurements or payment, and it was mainly used by pilgrims to pay their half-shekel taxes before arriving to the Temple Mount. Now, this particular Becca stone was found in sediments collected near the Robinson's Arch back in 2013 in the Emek Tzurim National Park, and it's since been dated as being around 3,000 years old. But there are 2 other reasons that this particular find is exciting researchers. The first is that, unlike previously found Becca weights, this one is inscribed in mirror script, meaning the inscription itself is written backwards, suggesting that the artisans who made Becca weights were the same artisans commissioned to create seals and other items with reversed images and text. IAEA archaeologist and director of excavations Eli Shukron said that, quote, "apparently the seal craftsman got confused when he engraved the inscription on the weight and mistakenly used mirror script as he was used to doing," end quote. And the second reason is the location of the discovery being just beneath the ruins of King Solomon's Temple, because it again strengthens the correlations between biblical accounts and archaeological ones. Shukron again explained that, quote, "this is a word that is used both inside and outside the Bible. You don't need to ask too many questions. Just open the Bible and see it. It's very simple. You can see Becca written in the Bible and what it was used for, and there you have it," end quote. And indeed, the Becca is mentioned twice in the Torah, once in the book of Genesis regarding a golden nose ring given to Isaac's wife Rebekah, and again in Exodus as a way to weigh ingots of silver for payment. Finally, the Becca stone weight is now set to go on display for the public next month during Hanukkah.